Good morning, my name is Bill Poplar and I'm the Chief of Labor Relations for the California National Guard. Staff Sergeant Eric Kelly also works in Labor Relations. Before us you can see that the next topic is ethics, and our telephone numbers are on the screen along with our distribution list for email. And our agenda for the ethics block of instruction. I'll give you a second to read the definition of ethics and ethical. Here's the bottom line. Employees, supervisors, and managers must always have the courage and confidence to take the high road, which is the ethically or morally correct path. And so ask yourself a question when you reflect. Are you being ethical, or are you ethical? 3 things that you should take away from this class. First is dollar threshold for gifts from outside sources. The second is, what is the best way to dispose of an unwanted or unauthorized gift? And number 3, what are the exceptions for gifts between employees? As you can see, public service is public trust, and it requires loyalty and honest effort in the performance of your duties, and impartiality in the way that you conduct yourself. Basically, as a technician, you're required to work 40 hours per week, and in return you receive 40 hours of pay. So that's the honest effort. And we expect a good quality product no matter what your job title or assignment is. On another note, a pretty cool resource online is entitled Encyclopedia of Ethical Failures. One night when you can't sleep, or one day when you have nothing to do, just get on and do a search and do some reading. It gives you examples of what leaders have done wrong when it comes to ethics, and it will also explain what disciplinary action happened because of their improper actions. Some additional principles. EEO is equal employment opportunity, and you should have, or you will receive, a period of instruction on that topic. Satisfaction of financial obligations. If you're having problems making ends meet, what I recommend you do is to discuss them with your supervisor, and certainly call the creditor before the due date. In my experience, and we deal with this quite frequently, creditors will help you make ends meet, and they will allow you maybe even to extend the payment timeline, as long as you keep up your end of the bargain. Some basic concepts. Apply principles to propriety of conduct. What that really means is that you be mindful of how you act and how you treat others, and that you do that in an ethical manner. The agency ethics official is typically a JAG officer, so if you ever have a question about an ethical situation, contact your local JAG or give me a call and I can put you in touch with one of the JAGs here at Joint Force Headquarters. So you can see from the screen that there are prohibited sources, and typically you'll run into this if you are in a position where a contractor or civic organization can leverage your position to gain something that they want. You can see the basic prohibition. And the consideration is you have to be mindful that you should not seek employment with an outside agency, at least while you're on official time, you're on duty. That you be mindful and not misuse your position to gain something. And be careful about outside activities, which include social events and even political events. Alright, here's the exceptions. And the answer to the first takeaway is the first bullet. Gifts may be allowed if the value is less than $20 for each gift or occasion, and that does not exceed a total of $50 per calendar year from any one source or the same source. Of course, you can receive other awards and honorary degrees. They're things that do not have really any value. You can receive free attendance at certain events as long as you are participating in it. And of course, if you happen to have applied for a job in the private sector, you can have your travel and entertainment paid for by that company while you're actually doing an interview or something like that for that job. You just cannot be on official public time or in an official duty status while that happens. So don't forget, number one's on this slide. I'll give you a second to read this slide. The answer to the second takeaway is on disposition of gifts. There's various methods. The one that I most commonly see and the one that I recommend is to very carefully return it to the person or the company that presented it to you, and tell them that although you're thankful, you are not allowed to receive a gift of that value. Remember, $20 per gift, $50 total in a calendar year. The other way that I've seen people successfully receive gifts is the sharing portion. So for example, if you receive a trophy for being the most productive employee, and it comes from a contractor, say, well, because your employment status is as a federal technician, although you may have worked with them, you were not technically one of their employees. And so instead of it saying, congratulations, Bill Poplar, for being an outstanding employee, you could ask the contracting agency to change the inscription to read, congratulations, whatever the name of your activity is, for a job well done. And then you display that in a display case or on the countertop of the building where you work, and it's really on behalf of everyone. So you're sharing the credit, and you're actually not exceeding the $20 or $50 rule. I'll give you a minute to read the slide. So the bottom line is that a subordinate may not give a superior a gift, nor can a lower paid employee like a wage grade 8 mechanic give a higher paid employee like a wage grade 11 mechanic a gift. It creates a perception of bias or favoritism when that happens, because there's almost an expectation that if I give you a gift, I think I should get something in return. So we don't want anyone to get into that type of situation. Alright, and of course with any rule there is an exception. So take a second to read the slide. And I'll just highlight a couple. The first one's pretty simple. That's $10 per occasion. Excuse me, and there's not an aggregate total at the end or for a period of time. The one that always comes up during the holidays is the office shared food. And so, generally we have a potluck and we do like a white elephant gift exchange. There's always a dollar limit on the gifts, which are basically $10 or less. And the food, we have in the past come up with a way to approach that. So supervisors generally will bring in the meats, cold cuts, tri-tip, that type of thing. If the person's a GS9 to GS11, we typically would ask that they'd bring in a side dish to feed between 5 and 10 people. And then if you were below GS9, you could sign up or volunteer to bring in drinks, ice, cups, and utensils. And so we kind of would set it up so that the price or the cost of bringing something into that potluck was related to the pay grade, which ultimately equates to the amount of money that you make. So affordability is kind of what we were looking at. Personal hospitality at residence, I would caution against that. Just know that if there's if there's ever any alcohol involved, that puts really whoever's residence it puts them in a situation where there possibly could be some liability involved. And my experience is whenever there's alcohol, there's also a high probability that something very bad can go wrong. So just be super careful on that one. And then the last one, if or when you terminate the superior subordinate relationship, it's okay to give that person a gift, tell them thanks, you were the greatest boss ever, or you were the greatest employee ever, that type of situation. Misuse of position, we kind of touched on this earlier. Go ahead and take a minute to read. So use of public office for private gain, that's pretty basic and pretty simple. I would just be very careful if you're trying to get a different job that you don't solicit yourself as a subject matter expert. I work for the government, and if you give me this job, I will in return put in a good word to the contracting office so that you can get a contract for maintaining equipment or something like that. So be very careful about that. Revelation of non-public information. This is generally for official use only sticker or category. It does also apply to classified information and also law enforcement type of information. A lot of the things that we do on our state emergency or our involvement in state emergencies or supporting state emergencies are law enforcement related, sensitive. So be super careful on those types of things. Government property, generally we will get into a situation where someone uses a GSA vehicle to commute back and forth from their home. That is called domicile to duty, and it's against a regulation that applies to both Army and Air. It's okay though to use a GSA vehicle in the discourse of your official duty. So generally, it's okay to do that. And then unofficial duties on official time. Generally, this falls into a union-related situation where official time was not requested, and you're doing, day-to-day union business in that manner. When you aren't even a steward or an officer of the union. It could also fall into the situation where if you were elected or appointed to a nonpartisan type city council or school board, if there's a meeting in the afternoon and you're not in a leave status and you go there in uniform, it kind of gives the impression that you're representing the government. So be very careful about that type of thing too. I'll give you a second to look over the slide. The first bullet on there is pretty basic. Obviously, if you're currently a government employee, you absolutely should not accept any compensation, hold an office, or be given a title on behalf of that other foreign government. Um, the second bullet on there, as far as representational activities are concerned, if you are going to do something and you're in uniform, be super careful, because the perception, and I think we talked about this earlier, the perception is it leads people to believe that you are actually acting or speaking on behalf of the federal government, Department of the Army, Department of the Air Force. So be super careful. If there's any question about whether it's appropriate or not, please contact me or contact your local Judge Advocate General's office. And the final one on here, participation in certain partisan political activities. Be super careful. Again, call the JAG, call me. The essence of this is partisan means a party like the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. If it's a nonpartisan situation, you were elected or appointed to a city council or school board, generally those are nonpartisan, so you don't run on behalf of the Democratic Party. You run as, in this case, Bill Poplar for school board. So if there's any question, though, contact your local JAG or give us a call here. Take a second to look over the slide. So in the first one, the example is that you're a reserve officer, NCO, enlisted person, and you're voluntarily testifying before a state legislative committee on an issue. If you're called in that capacity to testify, it's okay to wear a dress uniform. If you're just doing it because you agree with it or you disagree with it, you should not do that in uniform, because again, it gives the perception to the members of that legislative body that you are acting on behalf of the Army or the Air Force. So be very careful. If there's any question, you know what to do. And as far as fundraising, it's okay to do that, but you got to do that in a personal capacity, meaning you cannot be in dress uniform and say, by golly, the Army really recognizes this charity, and I hope all the Army and Air Force people, give $100 to this fundraiser. So be very careful about that type of thing too. So in this case, it's certainly okay to be a part-time or substitute teacher, to do public speaking or even write books or publish articles, that type of thing. And just be careful if you're doing anything that somehow relates back to your official duties. And of course, there are exceptions to this, but if you use common sense, you'll never even have to worry about the exceptions. I'll let you go ahead and take a look at nepotism. This doesn't really happen very often, and it really, the key is to the definition of public official. But if you're a supervisor or manager or somewhere in a position of authority, you should always be very careful about pressuring people to hire one of your relatives. In this case, the public official, at least as technician personnel, the person to appoint or has authority to appoint, promote, or recommend employment, that really is a supervisor, manager, or in some cases even the human resources officer. So, but just be careful, because you don't want to give the perception of favoritism or putting pressure on anyone. The Hatch Act, this usually doesn't come up until around election time, and I'll let you read what a federal employee may do. And again, the key in the first one is nonpartisan, so it's not specific to a party like Democratic Party, Republican Party, Independent Party. You can, of course, attend fundraisers, but be careful about going in uniform. And you can hold office. Again, the key is nonpartisan. And then in certain cases, federal employees may not use their authority or influence to interfere with an election. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. And really, you're not able to engage in any type of political activity while you're on duty. So we don't have a lot of experience in this case. I do remember probably 15 years ago we had an Air Force officer that was elected to the state legislature, and at the time I recall he had to actually go into the inactive National Guard and could not wear his uniform or do anything while he was serving in that legislative capacity. Alright, if you have any questions, comments, or you're curious about a topic, send us an email, give us a call. Remember the 3 things that you should take away from this ethics presentation. The first is the dollar threshold for accepting gifts from an outside source. For an outside source is like a contractor or something like that. It's $20 per occasion with an aggregate total of $50 per calendar year. Number 2, the best way to dispose of a gift. Personally, I would be super humble and appreciative, and I would go back to the presenter and I would ask them to take the gift back because it's inappropriate. It exceeded the $20 or $50 rule. And an alternative way to do that, if it's a trophy or something like that that has a plaque, you could also ask them to take, Bill Poplar off of the plaque and add, in this case, the Human Resources Office for support throughout, 2015. So that the gift is given to everyone, not just Bill Poplar. And then the third takeaway was the exception for gifts between employees. And there were several of them. The 2 most common are you don't exceed $10 per occasion, and the second one that's really common is sharing food, those types of things during the holidays or potluck. So just be real careful how you do that, and try and stay on the right path, which is the morally and ethically correct path. And good luck to you.